Richard, a renowned architect celebrated for designing some of the most iconic structures in the city, such as the Horizon Tower, a gleaming symbol of modernity, had a life many envied. Critics praised his ability to blend functionality with art, but beneath the accolades, his heart carried a void no design could fill. Yet, beneath the accolades and success, he carried a profound emptiness. Years of fame and fortune hadn't filled the void left by the disappearance of Elena, the woman he once loved more than anything. One quiet evening, after a particularly demanding day, Richard found himself strolling through the park near his home. The towering trees offered shade, but his thoughts were restless, circling back to memories he had long tried to bury. As he walked, a soft melody drifted through the air, like a whisper from the past. It was hauntingly familiar, a tune Elena used to hum when they were together, her voice often blending with the sound of rain against the windows. The melody wrapped around him, tugging at emotions he thought he had buried long ago. Richard froze, his heart racing as he searched for the source. What he found was a young woman completely absorbed in the music, and unknowingly about to change his life forever. Years ago, Richard's life had been filled with hope and love. Helena wasn't just his muse. She was his anchor in a world that often felt overwhelming. They had dreamed of building a future together, a life as intricately designed as the buildings Richard created. But one day, everything fell apart. Elena vanished without a trace. One moment they were discussing their future, and the next she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just an agonizing emptiness that consumed Richard's every thought. He had done everything possible to find her. Private investigators scoured the city and beyond, but each lead turned into another dead end. Months stretched into years, and the weight of unanswered questions grew heavier. Why had she left? Was she safe? Unable to cope with the loss, Richard buried himself in his work. His architectural firm flourished, his designs became more ambitious, and his reputation soared. But the accolades felt hollow. Every building he completed was a reminder of the life he had once envisioned with Elena, a life now beyond his reach. The pain never truly faded. At times, Richard convinced himself he had moved on, yet he could never fully let go. Her laugh, her voice, and her favorite song haunted him in quiet moments. Walking through the park that evening, the melody brought it all rushing back. The grief he had tucked away, the questions he had left unanswered. It all resurfaced. It wasn't just the song. It was the connection, the memory, and the longing for a closure he had stopped believing he'd ever find. As Richard watched the young woman on the bench, his mind reeled. Could it be a coincidence? Or was this melody a key to the answers he had been searching for all these years? The melody pulled Richard from his thoughts like a lifeline, a sound so familiar it was as if Elena were there with him. He scanned the park until his eyes settled on a young woman sitting on a bench beneath a canopy of trees. Her head was slightly bowed, her long, dark hair cascading over her shoulders, as she hummed the tune with an effortless grace. For a moment, Richard froze, unable to move. The resemblance was uncanny. Her delicate features, her posture, even the faint smile that played on her lips. It was as if time had rewound, and a younger version of Elena sat before him. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding louder with each step. The rational part of his mind warned him this was impossible, but he couldn't shake the familiarity. Finally, he stopped a few feet away, his voice catching in his throat before he managed to speak. "Excuse me," he said, his tone hesitant, yet filled with urgency. "That song, where did you learn it?" The young woman looked up, her soft brown eyes meeting his. "Oh," she said with a gentle smile. "It's something my mother used to sing to me when I was little. I guess it just stuck with me." Her words hit Richard like a tidal wave. "Your mother?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What's her name?" The woman hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his question. "Her name is Elena," she finally said. Richard's breath caught. 1,000 questions swirled in his mind, but he forced himself to stay composed. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice steadying. "My name is Richard. May I ask yours?" "Sophia," she replied, tilting her head slightly, studying him with a hint of curiosity. "Sophia?" The name felt like a doorway to a truth he wasn't ready to face. Richard couldn't get Sophia out of his mind. The melody she hummed, the resemblance to Alina, and the mention of her mother's name left him restless. He knew it could all be a coincidence, but his instincts told him otherwise. He had to know the truth. Richard invited Sophia to his architectural firm under the guise of offering her an opportunity. "You seem like someone with potential," he had told her. "I'd love for you to join my team and explore a career here." Sophia was surprised, but agreed, intrigued by the unexpected offer. Over the next few meetings, Richard carefully observed her. The more they spoke, the more certain he became. There were mannerisms, expressions, even the way she laughed. So much of it mirrored Elena. His curiosity grew into a quiet desperation. He needed answers, and he needed them now. One evening, as Sophia left his office, Richard discreetly collected a strand of her hair from the back of her chair. He felt a pang of guilt for going behind her back, but he convinced himself it was the only way. Days later, the DNA results arrived. Richard sat at his desk, staring at the envelope as if it were a time capsule holding decades of unanswered questions. As he tore it open, his hands trembled, his breath shallow. The words blurred for a moment before snapping into focus. 99.9% match. Sophia was his daughter. Richard stared at the paper, his thoughts a storm of emotion. Guilt gnawed at him as he imagined Elena raising Sophia alone, likely enduring struggles he couldn't begin to fathom. He whispered to himself, "What kind of father was I, not even knowing she existed?" But alongside the guilt was an ember of hope. This was his second chance to be part of something he thought he had lost forever. Memories of Elena's laughter, her touch, and the dreams they had shared flooded his mind. He whispered to himself, "I have a daughter." As guilt and hope intertwined within him, her truth hit him like a tidal wave. Memories of Elena flooded back, mingling with the realization that he had a child he never knew about. A child Elena had raised alone. Guilt gnawed at him for the years they had lost, but beneath it all was a flicker of hope. He had a second chance. Richard invited Sophia to his office the next day, determined to tell her everything. As she sat across from him, he began cautiously. "Sophia, I have something important to share with you," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. She looked at him, puzzled. "What is it?" He hesitated, then continued. "I knew someone named Elena a long time ago. We were very close. I believe she's your mother." Sophia frowned, her confusion evident. "You knew my mom, but how?" Richard handed her the DNA results. "I didn't just know her, Sophia. I believe I'm your father." Sophia stared at the paper, her hands trembling. "What?" she whispered, disbelief flooding her voice. Sophia paced the length of her room that evening, clutching the DNA results in her hand. Her mother had never mentioned a man named Richard, never spoken of a father figure at all. Was it because of the pain, or something more? She couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, but at the same time, she felt a strange sense of belonging. Could she trust this man who seemed so genuine, yet was a stranger? "I didn't know about you," Richard said gently. "If I had, I would have been there. I searched for your mother for years. I never stopped." Basically, Sophia stood abruptly, overwhelmed. This can't be real," she said, her voice breaking. "I understand this is a lot to process," Richard said softly, "but I want to know you. I want to help you understand everything." Sophia said nothing, her mind racing. She needed time, and so did Richard. Sophia didn't avoid Richard after the revelation, but she was guarded. Her mind swirled with questions she didn't know how to ask. Finally, during one of their meetings at the firm, she spoke up. "If what you're saying is true, there's someone you should meet," she said cautiously. "My mom," Elena. Richard's breath caught. "She's alive?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," Sophia replied, her tone soft but hesitant. "But she's not the same. She's been struggling with memory loss for years. Some days she barely remembers the past." Richard's heart ached. The thought of Elena, his Elena, living all these years with fragmented memories was almost too much to bear. "Can I see her?" he asked, almost pleading. Sophia nodded. "I'll arrange it, but please, don't push her too hard. She's fragile." A few days later, Richard arrived at a modest house on the outskirts of the city. The home was simple and unassuming, far removed from the life he had envisioned building with Elena. Sophia greeted him at the door, leading him inside to a small living room where Elena sat near the window. Richard froze at the sight of her. Her once vibrant auburn hair was now streaked with gray, and the years had etched lines into her face. But it was still her, the woman who had captured his heart decades ago. "Elena," Sophia said softly, stepping forward, "there's someone here to see you." Elena turned, her eyes distant and clouded. "Hello," she said, with a faint smile, but there was no flicker of recognition. "Elena," Richard began, his voice thick with emotion. "It's me, Richard." She tilted her head, studying him as though he were a stranger. "I'm sorry," she said after a long pause. "I don't think I know you." The words pierced Richard's heart. He had prepared himself for this possibility, but hearing them still stung deeply. Sophia watched quietly, her expression a mixture of sadness and hope. "Mom, do you remember anything about your past, about someone named Richard?" Elena's brow furrowed and she shook her head. "No, but sometimes I see things in my dreams. Pieces of something, someone, but it's all so blurry." Richard's determination grew. "Elena," he said gently, "I'll help you remember, whatever it takes." As they talked, Elena began to recall fragmented memories, bits of conversations, moments of fear, and most chillingly, a man with dark, angry eyes. "What do you remember about him?" Richard pressed cautiously. Elena's voice trembled. "He scared me. I think he took me away, but I don't remember why." Richard's fists clenched as the realization struck him. It had to be Lucas, his former colleague and the man who had once shadowed him with admiration, but later burned with jealousy. Lucas had always envied Richard's success, calling his achievements luck. But it wasn't just professional envy. Lucas had harbored feelings for Elena, his longing turning bitter when she chose Richard. His betrayal now seemed like the culmination of years of resentment and unchecked obsession. The mystery of Elena's disappearance was starting to unravel, and Richard's resolve to uncover the truth only grew stronger. The fragments of Elena's memories haunted Richard. The man with dark, angry eyes could only be Lucas, his former business partner and rival. Lucas had always envied Richard, his success, his talent, and above all, his relationship with Elena. But Richard never imagined that jealousy could drive him to such monstrous acts. Richard shared his suspicions with Sophia. "I believe Lucas was behind this," he told her. "He must have taken your mother, manipulated her, and hidden her away." Sophia confirmed what Richard had said. Sophia was stunned but quickly resolved. If he did this, he needs to pay for what he's done. We can't let him get away with it. Their first step was gathering evidence. Richard hired a team of private investigators, and Sophia returned to the small village where Elena had been found, searching for anyone who might have seen or remembered something. Their breakthrough came when an elderly woman in the village shared her memories. "I remember her," the woman said of Elena. "She appeared out of nowhere one night, confused and scared. People said a man brought her here in the middle of the night, but no one knew who he was. He disappeared as quickly as he came." Meanwhile, one of Richard's investigators tracked down Charles, a former associate of Lucas, who had been involved in some of his shadier dealings. Initially reluctant to talk, Charles finally agreed to meet Richard and Sophia, after being assured his identity would be protected. I didn't know the whole story back then, Charles confessed, his voice shaky. Lucas came to me and said he needed someone handled. He was paranoid, always looking over his shoulder. I arranged for her to be taken to that village under a new identity. I thought it was just business. Sophia's anger boiled over. You thought stealing my mother's life was just business? She demanded. Charles looked down, guilt etched on his face. I didn't realize how far he'd go until it was too late. I'm sorry. I can't undo what I've done, but I'll testify. I'll tell you everything I know. With Charles's testimony and the village woman's account, Richard and Sophia built a strong case. They confronted Lucas in his opulent estate, but, as expected, he denied everything. You can't prove a thing, he sneered, his arrogance unshaken. Lucas smirked, leaning back in his leather chair. You're just as naive as ever, Richard. Do you really think anyone will believe you? Lucas was pleasantly surprised, his voice calm but firm. We don't need them to believe me, Lucas. The evidence speaks for itself. And the people you used to call allies, they're already talking. For a moment, Lucas's composure faltered, his smirk fading as the weight of Richard's words sank in. This isn't over, he hissed, his voice laced with desperation. But Lucas underestimated Richard and Sophia's determination. Days later, they filed a lawsuit and shared their findings with the authorities. Lucas's empire began to crumble under the weight of the evidence. Sophia and Richard watched as the once powerful man faced public disgrace and eventual arrest. Justice was finally within reach. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts, including kidnapping, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Lucas, who had once been untouchable, now sat powerless, his arrogance shattered as the truth of his actions came to light. As the judge announced the verdict, Lucas's face twisted with disbelief. This is a sham, he shouted, his voice echoing through the courtroom. I built everything from the ground up. You can't take it away. But his words fell on deaf ears as the guards approached. The gavel fell with a final thud, silencing him. For the first time, Lucas looked small, his empire crumbling before his eyes. Richard and Sophia watched the proceedings together. For Sophia, it was a moment of triumph, but also bittersweet. We got justice, she whispered, her voice steady, yet tinged with sadness. Yes, Richard replied, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. But the real work begins now, for us, for your mother. Lucas's conviction brought a sense of closure, but it couldn't erase the years of pain he had caused. Elena had spent 2 decades living in fear and confusion, and the scars were deep. Yet there was hope for healing, hope for a new beginning. Elena, who had been unable to attend the trial, was at home when Richard and Sophia returned. She sat by the window, as she often did, gazing out at the world with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. It's over, Sophia said softly, sitting beside her mother. Lucas can't hurt us anymore. Elena turned to Richard, her eyes softening. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling, for not giving up on me. Richard smiled gently. I never stopped looking for you, Elena, and I never will. In the weeks that followed, the three of them began to rebuild their lives. One afternoon, as they sat by the window, Richard brought out an old sketchbook. Elena's fingers brushed over the faded pages, pausing on a rough drawing of a small cafe. You used to sketch here, she said softly, her voice tinged with both uncertainty and recognition. Richard's heart skipped a beat. It was the first clear memory she had recalled in years. Slowly but surely, pieces of her life began to return, each fragment like a puzzle piece falling into place. Elena decided to sell her house, saying it held too many memories of the past. It's time to move forward, she said one evening as they shared dinner. Therapy had been helping her piece together fragments of her life. Just days earlier, she had smiled as she recognized an old photograph Richard brought over. I remember this, she had whispered, her voice tinged with both sadness and relief. It was a small step, but it felt monumental, a sign that she was slowly reclaiming the life Lucas had tried to take from her. As the sun set over their backyard, painting the sky in warm hues, the three sat together, feeling the weight of the past finally lift. They had lost so much, but they still had each other. And that was enough to begin again.